Prince Klemens von Metternich was a politician and statesman of Rhenish extraction and one of the most important diplomats of his era, serving as the Austrian Empire's foreign minister from 1809 and chancellor from 1821 until the liberal revolutions of 1848 forced his resignation. One of his first tasks was to engineer a détente with France that included the marriage of Napoleon to the Austrian Archduchess Marie-Louise. Soon after, he engineered Austria's entry into the War of the Sixth Coalition on the Allied side, signed the Treaty of Fontainebleau that sent Napoleon into exile, and led the Austrian delegation at the Congress of Vienna that divided post-Napoleonic Europe amongst the major powers. For his service to the Austrian Empire he was given the title of Prince in October 1813. Under his guidance, the Metternich system of international congresses continued for another decade as Austria aligned herself with Russia and, to a lesser extent, Prussia. This marked the high point of Austria's diplomatic importance, and thereafter Metternich slowly slipped into the periphery of international diplomacy. At home, Metternich held the post of Chancellor of State from 1821 until 1848, under both Francis I and his son Ferdinand I. After brief exile in London, Brighton, and Brussels that lasted until 1851, he returned to the Viennese court, this time to offer only advice to Ferdinand's successor, Franz Joseph. Having outlived his generation of politicians, Metternich died at the age of 86 in 1859. Born into the House of Metternich in 1773, the son of a diplomat, he was named after his godfather, Clement Wenceslas, Archbishop of Trier. Metternich received a good education at the universities of Strasbourg and Mainz. He was of help during the coronation of Francis II in 1792 and that of his predecessor, Leopold II, in 1790. After a brief trip to England, Metternich was named as the Austrian ambassador to the Netherlands, a short-lived post, since the country was brought under French control the next year. He married his first wife, Eleanor von Kaunitz, in 1795, which aided his entry into Viennese society. Despite having numerous affairs, he was devastated by her death in 1825. He would later remarry, wedding Baroness Antoinette Lecam in 1827 and, after her death in 1829, Countess Melanie Zicci Ferraris in 1831. She would predecease him by 5 years. Before taking office as foreign minister, Metternich held numerous smaller posts, including ambassadorial roles in the Kingdom of Saxony, the Kingdom of Prussia and Napoleonic France. One of Metternich's sons, Richard von Metternich, was also a successful diplomat. Many of Metternich's 12 other acknowledged children predeceased him. A traditional conservative, Metternich was keen to maintain the balance of power, in particular by resisting Russian territorial ambitions in Central Europe and lands belonging to the Ottoman Empire. He disliked liberalism and worked to prevent the breakup of the Austrian Empire, for example, by crushing nationalist revolts in Austrian North Italy and the German states. At home, he pursued a similar policy, using censorship and a wide-ranging spy network to suppress unrest. Metternich has been both praised and heavily criticized for the policies he pursued. His supporters point out that he presided over the Age of Metternich, when international diplomacy helped prevent major wars in Europe. His qualities as a diplomat are commended, some noting that his achievements were considerable in light of the weakness of his negotiating position. His decision to oppose Russian imperialism is seen as a good one. His detractors describe him as a Boer who stuck to ill-thought-out, conservative principles out of vanity and a sense of infallibility. They argue he could have done much to secure Austria's future. Instead, his 1817 proposals for administrative reform were largely rejected, and his opposition to German nationalism is blamed for Germany's unification under Prussia and not Austria. Other historians have argued that he had far less power than this view suggests, and that his policies were only exercised when they were in accord with the views of Austria's Habsburg monarchy. Early life. Klemens Metternich was born into the House of Metternich on 15 May 1773 to Franz Georg Karl Count Metternich Wienerberg zu Beilstein, a diplomat who had passed from the service of the Archbishopric of Trier to that of the imperial court, and his wife Countess Maria Beatrice Aloysia von Kagenegg. He was named in honor of Prince Clemens Wenceslaus of Saxony, the Archbishop-Elector of Trier and the past employer of his father. He was the eldest son and had one older sister. At the time of his birth the family possessed a ruined keep at Beilstein, a castle at Wienerberg, an estate west of Koblenz, and another in Königswart, Bohemia, one during the 17th century. At this time Metternich's father, described as a boring babbler and chronic liar by a contemporary, was the Austrian ambassador to the courts of the three Rhenish electors. Metternich's education was handled by his mother, heavily influenced by their proximity to France. For many years Metternich considered himself able to communicate better in French than German. As a child he went on official visits with his father and, under the direction of Protestant tutor John Frederick Simon, was tutored in academic subjects, swimming, and horsemanship. In the summer of 1788 Metternich began studying law at the University of Strasbourg, matriculating on 12 November. While a student he was for some time accommodated by Prince Maximilian of Zweibrücken, the future King of Bavaria. At this time he was described by Simon as happy, handsome and lovable, though contemporaries would later recount how he had been a liar and a braggart. Metternich left Strasbourg in September 1790 to attend Leopold II's October coronation in Frankfurt, where he performed the largely honorific role of ceremonial marshal to the Catholic bench of the College of the Counts of Westphalia. There, under the wing of his father, he met with the future Francis II and looked at ease among the attendant nobility. Between the end of 1790 and summer of 1792 Metternich studied law at the University of Mainz, receiving a more conservative education than at Strasbourg, a city the return to which was now unsafe. In the summers he worked with his father, who had been appointed plenipotentiary to the Austrian Netherlands. In March 1792 Francis succeeded his father Leopold as Holy Roman Emperor and was crowned in July, affording Metternich a reprisal of his earlier role of ceremonial marshal. To this he added the honor of opening the accompanying ball alongside Louise of Mecklenburg. In the meantime France had declared war on Austria, beginning the War of the First Coalition, and making Metternich's further study in Mainz impossible. Now in the employment of his father, he was sent on a special mission to the front. Here he led the interrogation of the French Minister of War, the Marquis de Bournonville, and several accompanying National Convention commissioners. Metternich observed the siege and fall of Valenciennes, later looking back on these as substantial lessons about warfare. In early 1794 he was sent to England ostensibly on official business, helping Viscount de Sandro-Anne, the Treasurer-General of the Austrian Netherlands, to negotiate a loan, marriage and the Congress of Rastatt. In England he met the King on several occasions and dined with a number of influential British politicians, including William Pitt, Charles James Fox and Edmund Burke. Metternich was nominated the new minister plenipotentiary to the Austrian Netherlands and left England in September 1794. Unfortunately, he found an exiled and powerless government in headlong retreat from the latest French advance. In October a revitalized French army swept into Germany and annexed all of the Metternich estates except Königswart. Disappointed, and affected by strong criticism of his father's policies, he joined his parents in Vienna in November. On the 27th of September 1795 he married Countess Eleanor von Kaunitz, a granddaughter of former Austrian Chancellor Wenzel Kaunitz. The marriage was arranged by Metternich's mother and introduced him to Viennese society. This was undoubtedly part of the motivation for Metternich, who demonstrated less affection for her than she for him. Two conditions were imposed by the father of the bride, Prince Kaunitz. First, the still youthful Eleanor was to continue to live at home, and second, Metternich was forbidden from serving as a diplomat as long as the prince was still alive. Their daughter Maria was born in January 1797. After Metternich's studies in Vienna, the prince's death in September 1797 allowed Metternich to participate in the Congress of Rastatt. Initially his father took him as a secretary while ensuring that, when proceedings officially started in December 1797, he was named the representative of the Catholic bench of the College of the Counts of Westphalia. Aboard Metternich remained at Rastatt in this role until 1799 when the Congress was finally wound down. During this period Eleanor had chosen to live with Metternich at Rastatt and gave birth to sons Francis. Shortly after the end of the Congress, Klemens. Much to Metternich's anguish, Klemens died after only a few days, and Francis soon contracted a lung infection from which he would never recover. Ambassador. Dresden and Berlin. The Holy Roman Empire's defeat in the War of the Second Coalition shook up diplomatic circles, and the promising Metternich was now offered a choice between three ministerial positions: to the Imperial Diet at Regensburg, to the Kingdom of Denmark at Copenhagen, or to the Elector of Saxony at Dresden. He chose Dresden in late January 1801, and his appointment was officially announced in February. Metternich summered in Vienna, where he wrote his instructions, a memorandum showing much greater understanding of statesmanship than his earlier writing. He visited the Königswarter state in the autumn before taking up his new position on the 4th of November. The subtleties of the memorandum were lost on the Saxon court, which was headed by the retiring Frederick Augustus, a man with little political initiative. Despite the boredom of the court, Metternich enjoyed the light-hearted frivolity of the city and took up a mistress, Katharina Bagration, who bore him a daughter, Clementine. In January 1803 Metternich and his wife had a child whom they named Victor. In Dresden Metternich also made a number of important contacts, including Friedrich Gentz, a publicist who would serve Metternich as both confidant and critic for the next 30 years. He also established links with important Polish and French political figures. The imperial recess of 1803 brought Metternich's family new estates in Ochsenhausen, the title of prince, and a seat in the imperial diet. In the ensuing diplomatic reshuffle, Metternich was appointed ambassador to the Kingdom of Prussia, being notified of this in February 1803 and taking his position in November of that year. He arrived at a critical juncture in European diplomacy, soon growing worried about the territorial ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte, newly the leader of France. This fear was shared by the Russian court under Alexander I, and the Tsar kept Metternich informed of Russian policy. By autumn of 1804 Vienna decided on action entered into in August 1805 when the Austrian Empire began its involvement in the War of the Third Coalition. Metternich's now almost impossible task was to convince Prussia to join the coalition against Bonaparte. Their eventual agreement was not due to Metternich, however, and after the coalition's defeat at the Battle of Austerlitz, Prussia disregarded the agreement and signed a treaty with the French instead. Paris. In the ensuing reshuffle in Vienna, Johann Philipp Stadion became the Austrian foreign minister, freeing Metternich to assume the post of ambassador to the Russian Empire. He never made it to Russia, as need had arisen for a new Austrian at the French court. Metternich was approved for the post in June 1806. He enjoyed being in demand and was happy to be sent to France on a generous salary of 90,000 gulden a year. After an arduous trip he took up residence in August 1806, being briefed by Baron von Vincent and Engelbert von Floret, whom he would retain as a close advisor for 2 decades. He met French Foreign Minister Charles Talleyrand on 5 August and Napoleon himself 5 days later at St. Cloud. Soon, The War of the Fourth Coalition drew both Talleyrand and Napoleon eastwards. Metternich's wife and children joined him in October, and he went into society, using his charm to win great eminence there. The presence of Eleanor did not prevent him from a series of affairs that certainly included Napoleon's sister Caroline Murat, Lord Junot, and perhaps many besides. After the treaties of Tilsit of July 1807, Metternich saw that Austria's position in Europe was much more vulnerable, but believed the accord between Russia and France would not last. In the meantime, he found the new French foreign minister, Jean-Baptiste Champagny, unaccommodating and struggled to negotiate a satisfactory settlement over the future of several French forts on the river. Over the following months, the reach of Austrian policy, and Metternich's own reputation, increased. Metternich pushed for a Russo-Austrian alliance, though Alexander was too preoccupied with the 3 other wars he was engaged in to commit. Over time, Metternich came to see an eventual war with France as inevitable. In a memorable event, Metternich argued with Napoleon at Napoleon's 39th birthday celebrations in August 1808 over the increasingly obvious preparations for war on both sides. Soon after, Napoleon refused Metternich's attendance at the Congress of Erfurt. Metternich was later glad to hear from Talleyrand that Napoleon's attempts at the Congress to get Russia to invade Austria had proved unsuccessful. In late 1808, Metternich was recalled to Vienna for 5 weeks of meetings about the possibility of Austria invading France while Napoleon was on campaign in Spain. His memoranda reported that France was not united behind Napoleon, that Russia was unlikely to want to fight Austria, and that France had few reliable troops that could fight in Central Europe. Back in Paris, Metternich was overtly apprehensive about his own safety. When Austria declared war on France, Metternich was indeed arrested in retaliation for the arrest of 2 French diplomats in Vienna. But the effects of this were minimal. He was allowed to leave France under escort for Austria in late May 1809. After Napoleon's capture of Vienna, Metternich was conducted to the Austrian capital and exchanged there for the French diplomats.